Picture this for a second. It's a random Tuesday night, and you're sitting at your kitchen table with your laptop open, staring at your bank account, doing that thing we all do where we kind of mentally subtract the mortgage payment before it even hits. You already know it's coming. You've built your whole month around it. Groceries, gas, maybe a little fun money if there's anything left. And then that one big number just sits there in the back of your mind like a permanent tenant who never pays rent, ironically. And honestly, most of us have just accepted that as normal. That's just what having a house means, right? You owe on it. Forever, basically. Or at least it feels that way. But then, and this is the part that gets me every time, every once in a while you hear about someone who paid theirs off. Fully. Completely. $0 owed. And there's this strange look that crosses their face when they talk about it, like they're describing a religious experience or something. They get quiet for a second. And you think, what is that? What do they know that I don't? My name is Steve, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, human psychology, and why some people seem to move through their financial life with this quiet, settled confidence, while others, who are making just as much, sometimes more, feel like they're sprinting on a treadmill that never stops. And a few months ago, I went down this rabbit hole trying to understand what actually happens, psychologically and practically, the moment someone pays off their house. Not the fantasy version, the real version. And what I found kind of rearranged how I think about money altogether. Because it's not really about the house. It's about what the house was doing to your brain the entire time you owed on it, without you even realizing it. There's a mental weight that lifts, sure, but there's also a strange identity shift, a change in how you make decisions, even how you argue with your spouse, weirdly enough. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to look at your own mortgage completely differently, whether you've got 30 years left or 3. Okay, so here's the first thing that surprised me. When people talk about paying off debt, they usually focus on the math, interest saved, monthly cash flow freed up, all that stuff. And yeah, that's real, we'll get to it. But almost universally, the people I read about and talked to describe something else first, something quieter. They talk about sleep. They talk about this background hum of tension, just stopping. Think about it like this. You know that sound a refrigerator makes? That low buzz you don't consciously hear anymore because you've lived with it so long? You only notice it the moment it shuts off. Suddenly the room feels different, bigger somehow, quieter in a way that's almost loud. That's what a mortgage is, psychologically, for most people. It's humming in the background of every financial decision you make for years, sometimes decades, and you stop consciously hearing it. You've adapted to the noise, but your nervous system hasn't fully adapted. There's actual research on this. Chronic financial obligation is linked to elevated stress markers, even in people who are, on paper, doing fine. Not because they can't make the payment, but because the payment is always due again. It's a recurring event with no finish line in sight for most of your working life. And your brain, whether you like it or not, is quietly tracking that. So when the mortgage disappears, people don't just say, "Oh good, more money." They say things like, "I didn't realize how tense I was," or "I feel lighter." That's not a metaphor to them. That's a literal physical sensation. The weight was real, even if it was invisible. Here's why this matters for you. Even if payoff day is decades away, you don't have to wait until the debt is zero to start addressing the stress. A lot of people I've talked to found relief just from making the debt visible, like actually visible. Not a number buried in an app, but something you look at. A whiteboard, a paper thermometer chart you color in, like a kid's fundraiser poster, except it's your house. It sounds almost silly, but there's something about externalizing the invisible hum that takes some of its power away. You're not pretending the weight isn't there. You're just finally looking straight at it instead of carrying it around unconsciously. All right, second big shift, and this one's more practical. But it's honestly kind of wild once you sit with it. When your house is paid off, that money, the mortgage payment, doesn't vanish. It has to go somewhere. It's not like the universe just deletes 400 or 1,000 or $2,000 a month from existence. So the real question becomes, who does that money answer to now? And this is where I think people trip up, because for years that money had a job. A very clear, very boring job. Pay the bank, on this date, this amount, no negotiation, no creativity required. It was basically an employee that showed up, did its one task, and left. Once the mortgage is gone, that money is suddenly unemployed. Free. And free money is a weird thing to have in your life if you're not used to it, because now it needs direction, or it just kind of wanders off into lifestyle inflation without you noticing. I think of it almost like, you know when a kid graduates high school and suddenly has all this unstructured time? Some of them use it to build something amazing. Some of them just sleep till 2 and drift. Same energy, completely different outcome, and the only difference is direction. That's what that mortgage money is like the month after payoff. It's got energy. Does it have direction? This is the part where I gently push back on the idea that paying off your house is the finish line. Honestly, it's more like a really significant checkpoint that quietly hands you a new decision to make every single month for the rest of your life. Some people redirect it straight into retirement accounts and just keep living the exact same lifestyle otherwise, which, if you ask me, is one of the most powerful and underrated moves in personal finance. Because think about the math for a second. If you were comfortably living on your income minus the mortgage payment for years, that means, by definition, you already know how to live without that money. You've proven it. The habit is built. So redirecting it into investments isn't even really a sacrifice. You're just continuing to do what you were already doing, except now the payment goes to your future self instead of a bank. Other people use it to breathe, cut back hours, take a lower stress job, spend more time with their kids. And genuinely, there's no wrong answer here. But there is a wrong non-answer, which is letting it just seep into your spending without a decision ever being made. That's the trap. Not because bigger spending is evil, but because it happens by accident instead of on purpose, and accidental spending rarely makes anyone happier. Intentional spending does. There's actually a difference, and it's not subtle once you notice it. Now here's the one that genuinely surprised me the most, and it's a little uncomfortable to talk about honestly. Paying off your house changes how you see yourself. Not in a vague, feel-good quote way, in a very specific, sometimes disorienting way. See, for most of adult life, a huge chunk of people's identity is quietly wrapped around this idea of being a person who owes money. Not consciously. Nobody walks around thinking, I am defined by my debt. But it shapes decisions more than we admit. It affects how safe you feel taking a career risk. It affects whether you feel like you're allowed to slow down. It even affects arguments in relationships. How many fights about money are actually about the debt itself, versus about the underlying fear that debt represents? The fear of not being okay. The fear of one bad month unraveling everything. And then the debt is gone. And there's this weird beat of, now what am I? If your whole financial personality was built around the responsible one who's grinding to pay off the house, and suddenly that mission is complete, some people feel almost aimless for a bit. It's a strange kind of grief, if you can believe that. Grieving a burden. Sounds absurd when you say it out loud, but I've heard this from more than a few people. That weird flatness after a big win because the goalpost that organized their whole effort just disappeared. This actually connects to something psychologists talk about with any major goal completion, even happy ones. Getting married, finishing a degree, hitting a big financial milestone. There's often this letdown afterward, not because the achievement wasn't good, but because striving itself gives structure to our days, and when the striving stops, we have to build new structure from scratch. Nobody warns you about that part. Everyone just assumes payoff day is pure euphoria and confetti, and sometimes it's more like standing in a very quiet, very clean room, wondering what you're supposed to do with your hands now. So here's the actionable piece. If you're paying off debt right now, start thinking today about what you're paying it off toward, not just what you're paying it off away from. What does life actually look like on the other side? Not in vague terms like freedom, but specifically, more time with your kids doing what? Career flexibility to pursue what? Give the goal a destination, not just an escape, and that identity gap won't hit nearly as hard. Let's shift gears a little and get practical because there's a financial nuance here that trips a lot of people up, and it's the kind of thing that sounds obvious once explained but honestly isn't obvious at all beforehand. Once your house is paid off, it becomes, in a strange way, both your safest asset and your riskiest one, depending on how you look at it. Safest because nobody can take it from you over a missed payment. There's no missed payment anymore. That's real, tangible security. Genuinely underrated in a world where a surprise layoff can spiral into a real crisis for people with a mortgage still hanging over them. But here's the twist. It's also, suddenly, a huge chunk of your net worth just sitting there in a form you can't easily spend. Your house doesn't pay your electric bill. It doesn't buy groceries. Unless you sell it, refinance it, or borrow against it, all of which kind of undo the whole point, that equity is frozen. Some financial planners call this house rich, cash poor, and it's a very real trap, especially for people who pay off their mortgage aggressively in their 40s or 50s and then realize most of their wealth is locked inside four walls and a roof, with not enough liquid savings to actually enjoy the freedom they worked so hard for. I think about it like a beautiful, fully paid-for car sitting in a garage that you never drive because you're scared to put miles on it. Technically, you own an incredible asset. Practically, if it's not serving your actual life, what's it doing for you day to day? So the takeaway here isn't don't pay off your house, it's pay it off with your eyes open about what it does and doesn't give you. Before you throw every spare dollar at the mortgage, make sure you've got liquid savings, retirement contributions, and some breathing room outside the house itself. A paid-off house next to an empty emergency fund isn't actually the security blanket it feels like. It's security with an asterisk. Last big one. And honestly, maybe the most personal. Once the mortgage is gone, people describe a shift in how they relate to money generally. Not just the amount of it, but the emotional charge around it. Money stops being something that's mostly about survival and defense and starts becoming something that's about direction and meaning. That's a genuinely different relationship. Think about it. For years, so many financial decisions are filtered through this lens of, can we afford this given the mortgage? It's the silent variable in every conversation about a vacation, a career change, a new car, having another kid. Once that variable disappears, people often describe feeling almost unmoored for a bit, like I mentioned earlier. But then, and this is the good part, they describe making decisions from a completely different emotional place. Less scarcity, more clarity, weirdly. Some people even say they became more generous, more willing to help family, more relaxed about splitting a bill at dinner, instead of doing that mental gymnastics of who owes what down to the cent. Small thing, but it says something bigger about what shifted internally. And I think that's the real headline here, if there is one. Paying off your house isn't really the end goal. It's a door. What's actually life-changing is what you choose to walk toward once you're through it. The number on the mortgage statement was never really the main character in this story. Your relationship with security, with risk, with time, with generosity, that's the main character. The house payoff is just the moment the plot twist happens. So let's zoom back out for a second because we covered a lot, and I want you to walk away from this with something you can actually use, not just a nice feeling that fades by tomorrow morning. The mortgage isn't just a bill, it's a background hum you've probably stopped consciously hearing, but your nervous system hasn't. The money doesn't disappear when the debt does. It just becomes unemployed and needs new direction. And that direction should be chosen on purpose, not left to drift. Your identity might wobble a little when the striving stops, so it helps enormously to know what you're moving toward, not just what you're escaping. Your paid-off house becomes this strange dual thing, deeply safe and also frozen, so don't let it replace real liquid security. And underneath all of it, your entire relationship with money shifts from defense to direction, from scarcity to something calmer. Here's what I genuinely leave you with. You don't need to wait for payoff day to start benefiting from any of this. You can start making that mortgage money's future job description right now, even while you're still paying it off. You can start defining what you're working toward, not just what you're working away from. You can build that liquid cushion alongside the payoff instead of after it. Because the truth is, The peace people describe on the other side of a paid-off house isn't really coming from the house. It's coming from clarity, and clarity is something you're allowed to build starting today, whether you owe $300,000 or $3,000. So, whatever stage you're at with your own home, whether you just signed the papers last month or you're 3 payments away from being done forever, maybe take 5 minutes this week and actually picture it. Not vaguely, specifically. What do you want that freed up money to be doing for you? Who do you want to become once that quiet hum finally stops? Because everything really does change once the house is paid off. But the best part is, you get to decide what it changes into.